Well, at the moment, there's 5 teams vying to avoid 2 spots in the Championship relegation battle. Sheffield Wednesday, 27 points adrift of safety, as the points deduction this afternoon. Another 6 points added by the EFL means they're 27 points adrift of safety. Going to be quite a big ask, I would think, to for them to beat the drop. So I think that's one relegation place pretty much assured. There's 5 teams at the moment that are in contention. That's not to say that other candidates might not emerge, but at the moment, the teams I think that you'd be worried about would be Norwich, who got a big win, didn't they, the weekend, beating QPR 3-1. Portsmouth, of course, who have faced some question marks in recent weeks and looked pretty vulnerable. Swansea, who raced to that 2-0 lead, didn't they? West Brom under their new manager, Vitor Matos, but ultimately lost 3-2 at the Hawthorns to continue their difficult run, although some positive signs from their first half performance in the West Midlands. And Oxford, of course, who got that big 2-1 victory over Ipswich on Friday night. And what about Sheffield United? 3 wins on the spin. We'll be hearing from our co-host Ollie Mann to discuss whether they're still part of this relegation equation. Plenty to get stuck into then on this Championship podcast. So welcome along to EFL Debate. If you like what we do here, you can do us a massive favour by getting subscribed to us on YouTube and on Spotify. Delighted to be joined, as always, by my lovely co-host, Ollie Mann from the Sheffield United way. What a week that was. 3 wins in 3, Ollie. Absolute dream, wasn't
it? Yeah, I didn't see it coming. I didn't see it coming at all. Obviously, going into it, we felt it was a really high worry game, shall we say, in terms of the one against Wednesday. It was more anxiety, pressure, mental strength. Can you come through that challenge? Yes, with ease in the end. And I think that says a lot more about Wednesday than it did about United. And I think a lot of people probably looked at that result and said, well, yeah, cool, fine, let's crack on.
It's the symbolism, isn't it? Rather than the technical, so sorry to cut you off there, but it's rather than the actual how difficult was the victory, it's the symbolism of beating your rivals. It makes such a difference to the psyche of the club, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It just breeds positivity. I mean, God forbid you dare celebrate a victory like that, of course.
Oh, I know. But, could you?
Yeah, I think we had a nice afternoon. But no, exactly that. It built some positivity and some momentum. You know, we took that into the Portsmouth game. And if I'm being honest, I thought the Portsmouth game was a nothing game for 40 minutes. Until the red card, I thought it was lethargic. I thought United looked like they were suffering a hangover from the Wednesday game. But then to get through that, obviously, Portsmouth go down to 10. And if I'm honest, I was really disappointed with their performance. I expected more from them. So then you see United get 2 3-0 victories in a row. And then we're 3-0 up in half an hour at the King Power. No idea where that came from, but what a start to the game, you know, 2 up in 5 minutes. And yeah, it feels different now. All season, I've just, you know, constantly been battering that sort of negativity drum. It's a relegation battle. Get used to it. We know where we are. But if these last 3 performances are things we can keep up, you know, it looks like we've got a really settled side. Maybe it's not a relegation battle, but we'll not get carried away, because if I get carried away, we'll get hammered 5-0 by Stoke.
Exactly, yeah. You've got to keep your feet on the ground, I think. Because also on paper, it's 19th, they're only a couple of points above the drop zone. So still on paper, it's a relegation battle, but my goodness, does the situation look much improved. I wanted to ask you about Callum O'Hare, Ollie, because you mentioned even when collectively the Blades were struggling and wildly out of form, Callum O'Hare was low-key having a really good season. Are we allowed to enjoy his performances more enthusiastically now, perhaps?
Oh, yeah, he's high-key having a good season now. We can all be carried away. We can talk about him.
It's funny, I've never heard the expression high-key. I've only ever heard the expression low-key.
Nobody ever says high-key, but they should.
Yeah, I think so. We've invented a new word, haven't we?
And we stand by it. A really interesting one from Callum O'Hare, because it's really been his season in this United side. You know, since Gustavo Horma's injury that he picked up the first international break, I think it was. In fact, must have been the second international break, just after Wilder had come back. We really didn't know where the creativity was going to come from. Who's going to score our goals? Who's going to set them up? Where are we going to have these moments of brilliance? And O'Hare has stepped up to an unbelievable rate. I think the stats that really stand out to me in this United team We are top of the league, I believe, in terms of ball recoveries in the opposition's final third. And so much of that will just be Callum O'Hare. I'm sure if you looked at his stats and then looked at United's, they'll be almost a crossing line because he just forces mistakes constantly out of the defenders. His pressing energy is outstanding, but he's really sort of this season delivering them product. Last year, he was frustrating in that he'd have the ball in fantastic areas and you'd be like, just shoot, just pass, just do something. And he would always take an extra touch. It was almost as if he didn't believe in himself enough to really have that final end product. But this year, we're seeing a different man. And I mean, look, I look at his stats, six assists, 4 goals. One of those assists was a half-a-yard layoff for Gustavo Harmon midweek when he thundered one in from 30 yards. But another one of those assists is smacking a volley in the bottom corner that just happens to bounce off Riedewald's backside. So, I think the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away when it comes to the assists for Callum O'Hare. But yeah, he's having a brilliant season. He is our main man. And yeah, I don't think anybody will have a bad word to say about him right now because he's flying.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, great time for Sheffield United. Absolutely. I wanted to ask you about Portsmouth from what you saw of them on Wednesday. Where are you? Are you worried about them in terms of the relegation dogfight at the moment and how things are playing out?
I'm really worried about them actually after that performance last Wednesday because I spent most of last season being full of praise for Portsmouth because when United were flying last year, they came to Bramall Lane, but they identified weaknesses and tried to exploit them. We beat them, but we shouldn't have done. They should have done us about 5-0 at Bramall Lane last year. They were excellent. And it was all about the strength of Colby Bishop. He would isolate a centre-half, push back into him, really force the space. He almost pushed your defenders 5-10 yards back towards your own goal because they couldn't handle his physicality. That created the space which allowed Murphy to just dominate. And it was a beautiful performance from him. You saw somebody who was mucking for his team. He was getting back, winning his defensive battles. He was linking play perfectly. He was always looking for the option and always looking dangerous. Fast forward 12 months and we played them last Wednesday. And I was really worried going into the game about that, particularly with the addition of Segacic. I thought they'd now have a 3 that were able to really push that, really build and create. But I saw hero ball is what I titled it after the game. I saw Josh Murphy playing hero ball. I felt rather than looking for his passes, rather than trying to look at his creativity, he was trying to do his man every time. It was always, I'm going to do something special. Yeah. I think he, at one point, just after the second goal, he had a shot from about 35 yards and there were options available to him. And that's what worried me more than anything else, because this is a team built on their collective identity. They get the most out of their star players by the way they link together. And I saw a team that looked individualized. And that's what worried me more than anything. I have a lot of faith that they'll fix this and they'll turn it around because I do think there's a lot of really talented players. I really like Mousinho as the manager, but it was really concerning to me to see what I thought looked like a team of individuals rather than a real well-built team like they were last year.
Yeah, I think for Portsmouth, I think there's some positive aspects to the squad that they've assembled in the transfer window. And I think Jack Hancock summarises this brilliantly in his article on Medium, which I'd advise anyone who's interested in Portsmouth or the Championship in general to check that out because he's one of the best analysts out there. But I think the one sort of challenge, perhaps, with the way the squad was built was that they're relying on 3 things. They're relying on the sort of the higher risk gambles to pay off, I suppose, and we're yet to see that because there's a few investments that they're yet to see the ROI on. They've had some injuries, which hasn't helped because when you've got a pretty thin squad in terms of quality, you need your big hitters to stay fit. And then there's been some selection question marks. I've sometimes felt like Portsmouth's midfield. They've often played with Swift, Dazelle, and Pack in midfield. Not a huge amount of legs in there. Again, not always helped by the likes of Kozanovsky and Leroux being injured. But again, you put that midfield together and you pride yourselves on being an aggressive out-of-possession team. Well, sometimes you need a bit more athleticism to back it up. And then I think they're possibly short in a few areas, like left back, where Jacob Farrell's been injured. So there's been a lot of big reliance on Conor Ogilvie, probably a bit short on the right wing. and probably need a bit more competition for Colby Bishop. So in terms of depth and maybe cover for injuries and one or two of those left field signings not quite landing, they've just found themselves a little bit short, and it's up to John Mourinho to find the answers.
Yeah, and I mean, if any manager down in this dogfight is going to find the answers out of the team in front of him, I think Mourinho can do that. He's got so much credit in the bank from sort of a fantastic run. I think for me, the real sort of problem that Portsmouth need to solve this year is how do they get themselves back to Fortress Fratton Park?
Yeah.
Because that's been the one for me where last season, for so much of the season, they were really poor away from home. But at Fratton Park, they got points consistently. They were always able to say, don't worry about it, we'll get 3 points on Saturday, so the poor away days don't matter. That seems to have dropped away quite significantly for me at the moment. I'm looking at a team that, they've got some points at home, but they're still, I think, 18th, I think they are in the home table. And that really sums it up. They've got to find a way to get back to consistent performances at Fratton Park. They'll not get relegated based on what happens at Bramall Lane, but they might get relegated based on what happens at Fratton Park. And I really want to see them stamp their authority back onto that, because games like Bristol City, I really fancied them. I thought after Millwall, they'd probably want to kick on. They'd want another strong home performance. Bristol City had been a little bit out of sorts in recent weeks. And losing games like that is where I think Portsmouth really start to become a worry.
Yeah, I think if they can get full fitness, they've got some good attacking players. Like for Portsmouth to be in a championship relegation battle with Josh Murphy, Adrian Segicic, who's one of the most exciting talents in Australia, Callum Lang, we saw what he can do last season, and Cole Bishop, who's been a really integral player behind their rise. So they have got quality in attacking areas, but now they need to find a formula that works and that's going to maximise that. And some of that's been on injuries, and some of it, I think, John Mourinho, possibly from a selection point of view, that's been questioned, and it's up to him to find the answers. So my first guest of the evening is Luke from Swanscast of Swansea City. Good evening, Luke. Thanks so much for joining us. Quite an exciting first game for Vitor Matos, albeit ending in defeat.
Yeah, I mean, I went to the away game, so it was exciting. Couple of minutes in the first half, 20 minutes or so, but I think the rest of the game was backs up against the wall, to be honest. You can say like you should hold on to a two-goal lead, and you probably should. But if you look at the stats after the second goal went in, like West Brom would have been hard done by not to get something out of the game. If you've been totally honest, if you take your allegiance to the team hat off, I think the result at the end, we didn't deserve to get anything from it. But it's a shame that we are in a situation where we can't capitalize on those positions. The goals will be scored. They weren't really chances that were created as such. If you look at our XG, they were still quite low, which is something that's been happening for us all season. A lot of the goals we're scoring, you could say, are of the better quality of goal in regards to like a bit of individual brilliance, good finish from a position that quite often you wouldn't score from. We're not getting the goals that are like easier, the ones that you don't have to work so hard for, resulting in our XG being so low. And that's why we are where we are, because you cannot rely on that sort of goal over the course of a season to sort of get you enough to win matches at the end of the day.
So I suppose one of the key bits for me is I didn't think it was a bad start to the season from Swansea. I think it was 2 defeats in your first 8. Obviously, people were feeling quite confident. I know there'd been lots of conversations about the manager at that time, and it did feel quite positive. From your perspective, what is it that's gone wrong to this point? Like, what changed, I suppose, through that start of the season looking okay to where we are now?
Yeah, no, it wasn't a bad start to the season when it comes to the results. So Alan Sheehan, when he came in last season, one of the first things he did was made us sort of good defensively, quite solid. And if you look at the form that we had at the end of last season, we didn't have good creativity then. We weren't scoring loads of goals then. We were good defensively, and we were winning on the right side of small margin victories and the right side of a coin toss. Yeah, I got my words mixed up then. A coin toss in those games, and this season, I would say maybe we'd be on the other side of it at the beginning of the season. As much as we had a decent start to the season, if you look at our earlier on games, 1-0 away at Middlesbrough, we thought was a good result based on their early season form. We were actually still quite good defensively. We didn't create much, same old story. And that continued and continued. There was a couple of games we should have won at home against like Watford and Hull, for example, letting Leeds slip against Hull, specifically against Millwall, conceding goals on the cusp of half-time at silly times. Set pieces being a little bit of a problem for us. But because we haven't been able to create goals, like we can't do enough then. When the defence has started slipping a little bit, we can't do enough to win the game. So those games we were winning and getting points from, that were the narrow margins that we were on the right side of, are now turning the other way, whether the narrow margins and we're on the wrong side of it. And I think when the form started to get a bit negative and the pressure started to build up, and there's a bit of money spent in the summer, so I think a lot of the fans are starting to be a bit noisier regarding maybe a little bit more expectation from what they're seeing, not necessarily the results, because even those 8 games you mentioned at the beginning, a lot of criticism still around the lack of goals and the lack of chance creation and the XG. Like we're literally bottom of the league for XG, I believe, as we speak now. So all that criticism was there, and I think it just started building and building, and the pressure's just got more, and as a result, I think the defense has even started to slip, and now I don't know. We looked like there's no structure there against West Brom really for much of the game. Like it's gone back to really when it was bad under Luke Williams before he got sacked, in a way of like it was untenable, I guess, for Sheehan to stay on. Obviously, Matos has come in, and it's too early to criticise anything from what you've seen on the pitch down to him. He hasn't got any backroom team with him at the moment. He's literally come in on his own. There's some issues with work permits and all sorts, apparently, which I don't know all the details of because they won't obviously tell us. But it's not a good situation for a new manager to come in for his first proper job, really. Hard job, and I hope that he can turn around.
Well, one thing that stands out to me, Luke, is that I did see, based on the highlights from the first half at West Brom, a real identity as to what a Vitor Matos team is going to look like at its very best, and that is aggressive, penning the opposition in, lots of bodies into the opposing half, and really one-touch passing, incisive, and taking shots early. So I like that I can see an identity straight away. However, I would question in season the sustainability of that, because if you don't have a group of players that are suited to playing that style, you might be able to implement it for 20-25 minutes within a game, but actually over the course of 90 minutes it's not going to be sustainable, and then it is going to look a bit disorganized because the players are going to end up going from one extreme to another. It's a bit like when you start a race at a higher pace than you can sustain, and then you end up dropping to a much lower pace because you're not built to sort of sustain it, and it drops off a cliff. So that's my concern. It's great that he's got a North Star, but I would say for short term, while he doesn't have the squad that he needs, actually maybe try and implement a more realistic version of his identity.
Yeah, but I think part of the problem is that's what the fans want, and that's why Sheehan's gone, because they didn't like the way he was showing on the pitch, you know. So like I'm not trying to defend him. I think he probably did need to go in the end, but a lot of the criticism from even when he got appointed was the fact that they were concerned about the way that he was going to play football. They want a certain thing on the pitch, and unfortunately, and if they don't get that, Matos will be under pressure again. So
what would you define?
I personally think it's a catch-22, and I think that's part of the problem that Swansea's having at the moment. We are stuck in the rut of the Swansea way, as good as it was when it got us to the Premier League. He needs to adapt, and a lot of fans just they all have their own ideas of it, but I just think it's the poison chalice of every manager that fails, because they don't necessarily have the players to do it at a really good level in the Championship these days. It costs a lot more money to get those sort of players in, and the football landscape's completely different. Arsenal are winning the Premier League because they've got to set pieces and long throws. Like that's what works at the moment, you know. Like I'm not saying we need to completely rip it up and go down that route, but we need to change a little bit. I think Matos will be able to do that, but I do think you're right in what you were saying as well. But that's also been a trait that we've had all season. So like I talked about the XG a little bit just now. One thing that I haven't got the data to back this up, but one thing I have a theory of is like we do start really well for those 20-minute periods, and we have done early season in the games that we did well in, come out of the blocks and done really good early in the game. and gone ahead, say. So all of our chances and like anything attacking we're doing and where we're looking good against the opposition seems to be really early on. We'll get a lead. And it always seemed as soon as we went that one goal up, we took our foot off the gas and was happy to try and see out the 1-0 win, where we then don't create anything. And we either see it out or they equalise and then we have to then try again. Or we wait until we go behind and then we try again. And then it's like too late because they can just defend. And I think that was kind of their last season under Sheehan, but we got away with it perhaps because we were doing a bit better defensively. But now when we weren't, now we're conceding some sloppy goals from set pieces and stuff, like we never go for that second goal killer instinct. We kind of like just, we've done the hard work now. We don't have to create anymore. So I didn't know if a little bit the XG was misleading because of that. But I think obviously over a bigger sample, it would show bigger problems. But I think Matos might have saw a little bit of that. Maybe the energy's not there. Maybe the fitness isn't there for 90 minutes because of whatever they were being set up, perhaps off the ball a little bit too much in the past. So it was weird to see how we were doing this nice tiki-taka stuff in the first half of the first 20 minutes. And as much as I said, the XG wasn't great. The goals were well worked. But then at 2-0, like it just disappeared in the second half, especially like just could not keep a foot on the ball. I just don't understand how we can go from one extreme to the other, like without any changes really at that point as well. Like how can they literally not string a pass together? They didn't have a shot after the second goal. That says it all about the situation. They literally didn't have a shot. I think West Brom had like 25. So yeah.
Yeah, one player I did want to ask you about, Luke, was Ethan Galbraith, a big investment in the summer, signing from Leyton Orient. He actually played right back last season for Orient, but he's also a fantastic midfielder, so he can play either role. Very good ball carrier, possibly a slightly more dynamic version of Matt Grimes, perhaps. Is he somebody that you feel the club can develop and possibly sell on a profit?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's the standout of the season so far, along with Vapotnik. The signing of the summer for sure. I'd be surprised to see him in a Swansea shirt next season. He's talking about developing him. I just don't know if we're going to have him long enough. I'll be totally honest with you. He's displaying his quality on the international stage as well, like showing up the likes of Wurst. When they played against Germany a couple of weeks ago, all the headlines for how he, specifically him, outperformed this 100 million Liverpool flop. That's not the headlines you want to see when you want to keep one of your star players, you know. So, I mean, it's great that he's doing well. Don't get me wrong, but I hope teams are like, he's done it one season. We'll have to see if he can do it 2 in a row before we buy him, just so we get another season out of him. He's been really, really good, and he's the one bright spark in what has been a bit dull at the moment. And I think a lot of the other players need to look at him and step up, because I do think the squad is in a false position for the quality that's there. I don't know. I think he's the one that's standing out for sure.
Do you reckon Sheffield United would be able to put in a bid for Ethan Galbraith in January, Ollie?
I mean, if we can, I'd be up for it. I mean, he's a lovely footballer and somebody who I've been a massive fan of ever since he's come into Swansea, because I know that he really does stand out whenever you see him on the pitch at the moment. But I think there's another player who I really expected to be that man for Swansea this season, who's maybe not kicked on as much as maybe we thought. Goncalo Franco, how is he looking at the moment? Because I was really excited for this lad. I thought he was going to be a real standout, one of the breakout stars of the Championship this year. But it feels like that's gone a little bit cold maybe in recent weeks.
He had a really good season last year. I just don't know whether they've got the right balance in the midfield yet to make all individuals who are playing be allowed to sort of show their strengths maybe. There's been a lot of different things tried, different combinations, and for whatever reason, it's not worked for most of them, to be honest. I don't think Franco's been horrendous this season. I think he's just been average, you know. He's done all right. He's had a couple of better games and then a couple of worse games. But I think it's just more to do with the tactical balance of the squad that's perhaps letting him down more than anything else. I think Galbraith's just standing out because he's the one dictating everything, and I don't know. He's obviously a cut above, really, I guess. I think he's definitely destined for the Premier League, to be honest. And Franco, it's the second season in the Championship, and he's playing in a team that's not doing very well at the moment. And I just think he's becoming a bit of part of that. Do you know what I mean? Like he's just riding along with what's going on in front of him, unfortunately.
Well, Luke, do you think Swansea are going to go down this season, or do you think you've got just about enough with the likes of Vipopnik, Galbraith, and we've seen Vigouroux's form last season? Do you think you've got enough in there to keep your heads above water?
There's definitely enough there. Whether I think we will or won't go down doesn't necessarily correlate with that. We got the manager decision wrong at the end of last season, really, and it's come back to haunt us now. I don't blame the club for giving Sheehan the job. I don't think they had a choice based on the results that he was getting at the time. But now we're kind of backed into a corner, and the way that the fans want to play down here, like it takes time to develop that, and doing that mid-season's tough, especially without perhaps a window. And I don't know how much money they're going to have to spend in January based on what they brought in the summer. I think there's a few players brought in the summer that haven't lived up to expectations, which hasn't helped. The likes of Manuel Benson and
Vidal and Inisa.
Yeah, Vidal. I mean, I don't necessarily think Vidal's had proper crack. Sheehan didn't. Like, he only made his first league start 1 or 2 games before he got sacked. So, Anusa, yeah, I mean, he probably hasn't lived up to some, like the fees, like Ida as well. You know, he's get some of these players, there's fans on their back already because of what was paid.
Yeah.
That doesn't help the situation, really.
I
you
think
understand where the frustration comes from.
Yeah, I think if you're Swansea City, you need your 6 million signings to land.
Yeah. You need them to start performing, because otherwise that's a big was a risky signing otherwise. And we're in this position now where, like, if we get relegated, that's when the risk becomes a problem. We should, on paper, we should have enough to get out of this. It depends how much damage has been done now already in terms of momentum, the way the squad's gelled. Like, can you revert that now mid-season? I think, you know, if you take me back to 10 games into the Championship, there's no way I would have us down as a relegation team. Absolutely no way. So for whatever reason, things just didn't go our way in the last, 8 games. And sometimes as it works in the Championship, momentum goes both ways, and it's gone the wrong way for us. And it's tricky to reverse that sometimes. I know, I'm curious to know your opinions, maybe if I'm overinflating our squad, but I generally thought mid-table at least was where we were at in the summer, really.
So I would probably look at the squad and go, Vigouroux, I would give him a tick based on what we saw last season. I would think Burgess, based on what he's done in the Championship before with Ipswich. Cabango, I think, has been pretty reliable. Galbraith, we've spoken about. Vipopnik's in good form this season. Inisa was a £6 million investment. I think he and Tiemann have their moments as fullbacks. Yeah, I think it's not bad. I don't think it's a top 6 squad, but I don't think it's
I don't necessarily think promotion, but we finished 11th last year, like with an arguably should, you know, you could say it was an investment. I guess one knock-on effect we probably have had that we haven't said, I think, as much as Grimes left in January, and I know Galbraith is someone that's come in to fill that role in a different way. I do think, I mean, look at how Grimes is performing at Coventry now in the team that's got a bit more quality around him. And you've seen the results. You know, he's had a lot of stick from Swansea fans in the past for what he's done. But I think he's a fantastic player and very underrated over his time here. And I think maybe we're seeing a bit more of that now. I think Lewis O'Brien covered up some of the cracks when it came to that, the loss of Matt Grimes last season. Maybe that's a little bit of what we're missing.
Absolutely. Well, Luke, thanks so much for talking to us, and look forward to catching up later in the season.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Cheers.
Top man.
So my next guest is Malachi Aubrey from the Oxford Mail. Good evening, Malachi. Thanks so much for joining us. Oxford United then, 2-1 victory over Ipswich Town on Friday night. We all totally saw that coming, didn't we?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I did have a funny feeling. I will say, hindsight is great, but I did have a funny feeling that they might get something from that game on Friday. But yeah, it was. I don't really know where to start with the game, to be honest. I think it was a really well executed Gary Rowett ball performance display. After, I mean, it took him a little while to ease into it. Ipswich had a couple of chances hit the post early on in the first 15-20 minutes, but I think after that Oxford did really well. And the thing with, say what you want about Gary Rowett's style of football, his teams they'll never give up. They'll keep going right to the very end. Saw it at Norwich, saw it when Millwall came to the Kassam a few weeks ago as well. So yeah, I mean, it's a huge 3 points, really.
Yeah. One thing I was wondering was there does seem to be, for me, a Gary Rowett team. There's a defensive reliability about them, and that's kind of fluctuated a bit this season. Do you think there's signs of getting back to that on Friday night?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think the international break was huge, actually. The other week, it was a big moment for sort of him to reset and just be like, let's go back to basics. Let's get that structure right at the back. And yeah, that sort of solidity, positioning, judgment, all that sort of stuff. Because I mean, before the international break, it was sort of the results were slipping, weren't they? I mean, the one against West Brom, that was tough. I mean, the run that West Brom were on, it was. I mean, I don't think they'd won in 4 or 5 games. Ryan Mason under real pressure, and the Baggies fans were basically looking for anything to get on his back. As soon as Oxford scored that first goal, they were chanting unsavoury things at Ryan Mason. So that was a big opportunity missed. But to go back into the international break, I think that was huge, and we're definitely seeing signs of this defensive solidity. Middlesbrough game was really good, actually, as well. Probably could have maybe got a bit more out of that one.
Yeah.
Norwich sort of went the other way. That was seen as a must-win by lots of people. If Oxford are to stay up, I know it's November, but that one was tough. But again, went right to the very end. But yeah, Ipswich, I think, was as good a Rowett display as you're going to see.
Yeah, I think it's that kind of thing is why I have so much confidence, because I'll cards on the table, I predict Oxford for relegation at the start of the season, but I think what's really sort of changing me a little bit in relation to that is this knack that you have of consistently picking up points, and I think that's been the key thing for me of this sort of Gary Rowett philosophy, is that even it might not always be wins. It's not going to be 3 points here, there, everywhere. You talk about Norwich being a must-win. I would actually suggest that going away from home to a relegation rival that you're above, that's a must-not-lose. And having that ability to go again, you fight, you don't lose any ground or points to the others around you. That, for me, is the difference for Oxford. Right now, it's the reason they're obviously above that dotted line, and it's what will stand them in good stead for the rest of the season. Is that what you think is the key here? Do you, in terms of expectations, in terms of looking on for the season, do you see it as, let's just pick up our ones here and there, get wins where you can, but focus on being hard to beat and then kick on?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, for the run before the international break, and specifically, there was a little bit of panic after the Norwich game. I mean, Gary Rowett is as good as you're going to get as Oxford United in the Championship. And yeah, I mean, he'll give you as good a chance as anyone at staying in this division. And I think, I mean, if you'd asked fans before last week, if they take 5 points from those 3 games, I mean, anyone saying no is surely mental. Like that's ridiculous. You probably wouldn't have predicted the games where they picked up the points. Like you'd say, oh, they'd probably beat Norwich and then managed to scrape draws in the other 2. But I mean, yeah, as you said, Ollie, like the consistency is starting to come, I think, and Friday is the perfect result to kick on into a really big Christmas period, and then obviously got Swansea on Saturday. So, it's that sort of grinding out of results you're gonna have to put up with it, whether you like Gary Rowett ball or not, if you want to stay in this league.
Sure. One midfielder that I really wanted to ask you about, Malachi, was Brian de Keersmacher, because I watched your game at West Brom just before the international break, and I could tell that even though you were a bit on the back foot collectively, and it wasn't a great collective performance, I did highlight De Keersmacher as one who really impressed on the day. He's got a really classy touch and brings something different to that midfield. How important do you think it's going to be to keep hold of him in January?
Yeah, I think it's going to be quite important. Yeah. I hate to be that guy, but it's Malachi, not Malachi. I just want to point.
Malachi, sorry,
that's all good. Everyone gets it wrong, so don't worry. Yeah, I think it is really important. He started really well. Came from the Eredivisie in the summer and started the season really well. His form dipped a little bit before the international break and in the past couple of games. And I mean, I spoke to him. We had him before Ipswich in the pre-match presser, and he said himself, Gary said it, like a lot of the players have come from abroad because that's how the recruitment is sort of going, to try and find those little gems. But it's going to take a little bit of an adjustment for these players to get used to the Championship and its physicality and stuff. And De Keersmacher actually said, he was like, everyone in the Netherlands wants to play from the back. If you're worried in the middle of the park, just turn around and pass it back. He said he's come here and he's just watching the ball go over him all the time, and he's like, it's a bit of kick and rush. I think it's taken him a bit of an adjustment after those first few honeymoon period games, I guess. But yeah, I mean, if you want a snapshot of what he can bring to the team, just look at his ball for the winner against Ipswich on Friday. It wasn't like a hit and hope. I mean, that's a pinpoint pass for Plaqueta, and it was a great finish from him. So yeah, he does have those. He can bring those moments. He's very energetic as well. I thought he pressed really well on Friday. I thought the whole team pressed really well, but him in particular, especially early on. Yeah, I think they will keep hold of him in January. I mean, it would be, yeah. There's two midfielders that are fit basically at the moment in Volks and De Keersmacher, with Brannigan out for a few more weeks. So they're very light in midfield. So unless they bring in, 2 or 3 in January, which they'll need to do anyway, to be honest. It would be silly to get rid of him.
Certainly would. One thing that stands out to me is, I suppose, the injury to Cameron Brannigan has opened up an opportunity to Luke Harris, because it's meant you've had to play 4-2-3-1 rather than 4-3-3 with 3 midfielders. Harris, as a Birmingham fan, I felt like he bit of an impact sub for us last season, possibly struggled at times because we were a very possession dominant team in League One, and it maybe didn't suit him because he's more of an energetic pressing 10 who thrives best in more open ground. Do you think that the tactics that Gary Rowett employs is a better fit for him, possibly, than maybe the circumstances for him at Birmingham last season?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, he is full of energy. He's very feisty. He doesn't shy away from a tackle. And yeah, I mean, there was one which maybe could have been a red the other week. Got away with the yellow. I think it was probably the right decision. But I mean, he gets proper stuck in. So like a high pressing team, like I think Rowett is trying to do in certain games. I think it does suit him. I think he can thrive off those late arrivals in the box. His goal against, it was Middlesbrough, wasn't it? I think where he scored. Yeah, that opener. Sort that late run into the box and finished it off really nicely. I think if he can keep getting into those positions, then he'll do really well. I think he looks really bright, and he probably could have. Middlesbrough was his first start for Oxford this season, and he probably could have argued that he should have got one earlier than that game. I think it has suited him more of a possession based system. Yeah.
It's funny if Mark Harris is sparky, because then I'm wondering if Luke Harris is spooky. I don't know. I don't know what.
I don't know how you'd feel about that nickname.
No, that's awful. Sometimes I should keep these ones to myself. I wanted to ask you about the right back spot, Malachi,
Yeah.
because I think in January, I think you need a more athletic right back option. I think you might have one or two possibilities that are injured at the moment, which I'm sure doesn't help. But I think when Sam Long plays there, and I'm big respect to Sam Long because I think he's been a fantastic servant to Oxford United over the last 5 or 10 years. But I do think he needs his hand holding a little bit at this level, so you can see how close Stan Mills is to him out of possession in terms of protecting him from 1v1 duels. Whereas I think if you've got an athletic fullback who can look after themselves in 1v1s, then that maybe allows you to play Plaheta on the right, and he can stay high and wide and be ready for those counter-attacking opportunities, which we saw from him for the winner against Ipswich. Whereas I think when it's Long, you need your wing back to be a track back, tuck in wing back. You need a winger to be a track back, winger, get my words out, rather than the one that stays high and waits for those counter-attacking opportunities.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, as you said, Sam Long's been an amazing servant for Oxford United. Yeah, a player who's been with them since League Two, and if you'd probably picked from that League Two side one to stay after the Championship, I don't know if many would have predicted Sam Long. So yeah, I think he's been brilliant in terms of his reliability and his versatility and things like that. He's played in a few different positions, and he was actually really good up against Philogene on Friday. I don't think Philogene had his best game at all by all means. I thought he was pretty poor actually. But yeah, he did well. He did well on Friday. Yeah, he's not a long term, vision for that right back position. I think that is Brodie Spencer, who is injured. Was injured against Sheffield Wednesday, which is, I mean, about over a month ago now. So yeah, still waiting for him to get back. I think that's one that they're going to feel out in the next few weeks. He had a pin in his foot, and they've taken it out now, so it's sort of play it by ear sort of thing. Yeah, and Brodie Spencer looked really good before that injury, which is a shame. So yeah, definitely more of an athletic sort of player. Yeah, we've got Hidetira Vest as well. Wasn't in the squad against Ipswich because I mean, the Norwich game, which he started, was his first game back since August, I think. And yeah, he played well, came off, but then felt a bit sore for Ipswich. So he's another option, but definitely more of an attacking option. He basically played as a right winger against Norwich. And I thought he played pretty well, actually. But he's definitely someone who he has more legs than Long. He can get up and down a lot easier. But probably better as a wing back rather than a 4, which is what's been played most recently.
Yeah, I think Gary Rout likes a 4-2-3-1.
Yeah,
seems to be his preference at Oxford.
Yeah, so I think Brodie Spencer's the answer. Just wait for him to get back, and hopefully he can pick up where he left off. Really.
Yeah, absolutely. So looking forward to January then, Malachi. I'd possibly highlight a right back, as I mentioned there, depending on what Brodie Spencer's fitness issue is in Turavest. Do you think you're going to be in the market for another striker? Where do you think Gary Rout's going to want to add to?
That's a tough question. I think the midfield definitely is somewhere to address. He said the other week after Brannigan got injured initially, talking about the summer recruitment, and he was like, "Well, we signed about 15 strikers and wingers, and just a Keersmacher in midfield, basically." So, I think he's basically hinting that he needs a bit of help there. And I think he will get a bit of help there.
It feels like a lot of the strikers and wingers haven't quite landed necessarily. Like if I think Lancashire, Krastev, have they quite delivered in the way that you'd have hoped?
Probably not. I mean, it's a story of the whole team, really. It's just been inconsistency. But I think you're going to struggle to get that inconsistency when there's so many options, and every week there's a different one starting, which is great for like the intense run of games that we've got coming up and we had last week. And you balance the minutes really well. But I think as a player, if you're in and out starting one week and then coming on for 20 minutes the next, like it's hard to have that impact. But I think he is getting snippets out of them, like Krasdev off the bench on Tuesday, Paqueta off the bench on Friday.
I do
Yeah,
like Paqueta actually, because I think for a Gary Rowett team especially, because a bit like what I mentioned with Luke Harris, I think if Paqueta or Harris got a move to a maybe more aspirational, with all respect to Oxford Championship side, I think they might struggle. But in a counter-attacking system where you've got to be very strong against the ball or quick on the counter-attack, I think those are the kind of players who might find a way of doing well for what you need. So I can see the value in them.
Yeah, I think you're right for sure. He has frustrated a little bit Paqueta with his end ball, but he has.
If he had end product, he'd be playing in the Premier League, wouldn't he? Because he's got that searing pace. So
exactly, yeah, you're right. But yeah, in terms of striker, I'm not sure. Will Lankshire's done really well actually.
Okay,
he's scored 5 goals. They just need to get the ball to him.
I'll be honest, that's caught me out a bit. I wouldn't have guessed that it was 5. So yeah, fair play to him.
Yeah, no, he's done pretty well. I think, I mean, he's a big lad, so he doesn't really need to adjust to the physicality, but they just need to get the ball in the box to him. I did a piece a few weeks ago on why, I mean, Oxford haven't had a penalty in like a year and a half, so that was the main focus of it. But in like looking into why they just don't get the ball into the box. And I think they had the least balls into the box from any team in the Championship. So he's kind of just been starved of service, because if you can get a good ball into the box from De Keersmaker or Brannigan free kick or whatever, he'll do well. He'll pretty much finish it off. So I think he's done well. Hopefully, I mean, as long as he's not recalled by Spurs in January, should have him for the remainder of the season. And then in terms of
Spurs, if the loan manager at Tottenham's watching, keep it up.
I know he is.
Rubbish. Don't worry about it, loan manager at Tottenham.
I mean, I think it depends on what happens with Sparky in January. Really, I think Gary Rowett really likes him. Oxford fans had gone off him quite a lot. With his
he's very streaky striker, isn't he, Sparky?
Very streaky. And I mean, when you're not scoring goals, you're obviously going to get criticism. Off the ball, I think he's great, and I think he suits what Rowett wants to do, which is why he speaks so highly of him.
A bit like Tom Bradshaw, who he had at Millwall, who's a real workhorse. So he likes, if you're a centre forward in the Gary Rowett team, you've got to get through the legwork. So I think that's really important. Malachy, I'm going to bring in my next guest, which is Connor Southwell from Pinken. And we'll speak about Norwich in a moment. But Connor, just first of all, while Malachy's still here, could I just ask you about Oxford and what you thought of them the other Wednesday night, and what you made of your opponents?
Yeah, I mean, I watched them on Friday, and I thought they were better against Ipswich, to be honest, than they were against Norwich.
Thumbs up for that.
Which is it was a conflicting one, I think, on Friday night for anyone of a yellow and green persuasion. Watching Ipswich lose, but also watching Oxford go 8 points clear, it was very conflicted. But no, I thought they looked like, to me, exactly what they are, which is a Gary Rowett team. Battle hardened, fight, scrap, well organised. Rode their luck a little bit at times at Carrow Road. I think probably not their, from what I've seen and heard, probably not their best display this season, but ultimately kept themselves in the game by hook or by crook, and then scored a late equaliser. And I felt Norwich probably deserved to win the game on the balance of it. But ultimately, if you don't take those chances, and that in part was down to how well Oxford defended, but also how they exploited Norwich late on, then it was fair play for coming away with a point. And at that stage, that was more than Norwich had mustered in the previous 7 Carrow Road games. So it was a conflicting one, I think, from a Norwich City perspective. But definitely probably a good point for Oxford.
Malachy, do you think Oxford are going to stay up this season?
Oh, I don't like that question. Whatever happens, I think it's going to go down to the wire, to be honest with you. And it will depend on, these little draws here and there, if they can keep that going. I'd like to say yes. I think if they finish above Portsmouth, I think they'll stay up. So I want to say yeah, but we'll see. I think with Gary Rowett, you can never ever write them off.
I think so too. I'm a big believer in Gary Rowett. It's been eroded a little bit because Oxford haven't been quite as safe in terms of there's been a few runs where you got a little bit worried. So I do have some concerns there, but I think for now I'm going to put my faith in Gary Rowett just because you've got to back 11 years of Championship evidence, I suppose, haven't you?
Yeah.
Malachi, thanks so much for joining us, and everyone go subscribe. Is there a subscription option for the Oxford Mail for people who are interested in your work?
Yeah, there's a subscription option. There was an offer last week. I think it's still on, so you can take advantage of that, and drop me a follow on Twitter. My handle is just there. So
perfect. And that's Malachi Aubrey on Twitter for those listening on the podcast. Malachi, thanks so much for joining us, and catch up with you later in the season.
Nice one. Thanks for having me, guys.
Cheers.
See you later.
So, as I mentioned earlier, we're joined by Connor Southwell of the Pink 'Un on Norwich City. Great to have you on, Connor, for your insights. So I really appreciate it. Must have been such a relief to do that post-match video talking about a win, because you must have almost had trouble remembering what a win is and what it feels like.
Yeah, I think everyone at Carrow Road was probably a bit giddy at the final whistle, to be honest. And I'm sure if you've seen any footage of what it was like post-match, I mean, it was like celebrating a promotion. And I can understand looking outside in, it might have felt a little bit over the top, but to have had endured the dross that Norwich City fans have, it was a huge amount of relief. And
I said this to Ollie about earlier, like, please, the celebration police, just let people enjoy football and feel what they feel like. It's an emotive sport, isn't it, for crying out loud, you know?
Yeah, and particularly when you consider, I was there a couple of weeks ago after the Leicester game, and there were protests outside, and I watched the squad get kind of frog marched around the pitch by police. I mean, the contrast in emotions, and I'll use a Philippe Clement ism. He's described it as synergy. Was good to see and much needed. So yeah, it was nice to actually walk away from Carrow Road with seeing smiles on faces and seeing people leaving the ground content, because that definitely has not been the case at any stage of the season prior to this weekend.
No, that's really great to hear. And I think obviously it's two relatively positive performances now at home. Obviously should have beat Oxford, as you said before. You then finally get that monkey off your back and get the win. What is it that's changed with Clement? Is it that he's changed a lot on the pitch, or is it just that some of that negativity seems to have drifted away and it's given the team, the players, maybe just a little bit more confidence in terms of the way they were able to attack the game against QPR?
Yeah, I think it's definitely Philippe Clement and what he's done rather than the negativity. I think fans were probably waiting to see some kind of reaction or response. And for me, I distill it down to two things, which is intensity and structure. I think those have been the big two differences. You look at the second goal that Norwich scored, that comes from a really well structured press where they force an error from QPR first and foremost, and then it's just a clip pass from Kenny McLean that Sam Field, under not really any pressure, clips out for a corner. And then corner comes in, it's an own goal, and they're 2-1 up, and off you go. So probably an element of luck as well that they haven't got. You look at the goal against Oxford on Tuesday, and that was just a ball dropping in the penalty area favourably for them. That hasn't been happening. But yeah, they're pressing better. I think you basically look at all of the statistics on Saturday in terms of pressing and duels and all of those type of basic elements that we would associate with a team towards the bottom. All of those were up pretty dramatically from that Leicester game. So yeah, it probably a little bit of simplification as well in terms of the way that they've approached it. So all of those things, and I think he's been so impressive in terms of his character and his attributes, and he's managed with authority and quite a heavy hand, I would say. You look at the substitution of Matej Jurasek on Tuesday night, 16 minutes, brought him on, wasn't doing what he wanted him to do, took him off again.
Yeah, I like that.
Really big, bold decision that I don't think a lot of coaches would have made in stoppage time when they were winning, by the way. So, and then the way he kind of managed that post game and even pre the game on Saturday, and then to throw him in stoppage time and to see Matej Jurasek seemingly taking on those messages and going and pressing and blocking. So I think he's just got a response out of the team, the fans and everyone. And I don't know what the future holds, but certainly for this week, I think it's hard to argue that he's put a foot wrong so far.
I completely agree, Connor, because I think I don't know. I'm sure, obviously, it's always slightly tactical with managers because they've got to get those selection decisions right and in-game management. But I think the majority of the gig as Norwich City manager right now is people management. It's motivating, it's man management, it's restoring some kind of group harmony and giving the fan base an intensity and a work ethic and a way of doing things that the Yellow Army can really buy into, and it feels like he's setting those standards right from the off, which a long way to go, but that at least is something that gives me something to cling on to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll give you another example. I asked him in his pre-match press conference on Friday about Jovan Makama, who's been one of the better Norwich City players this season in terms of what he's offered. They signed him from Lincoln, probably didn't expect to be as involved as he has, but really, I mean, he looks like he's been grown and manufactured in a lab, but he's played on the right-hand side and so physical, so powerful. I think he'll probably go on to be a number 9, but I asked him about it in terms of, how impressed have you been coming in and having a guy like this? Obviously missed Saturday through illness, but he said, he's done well, but I still think he's at 30% of where he needs to be. And it just feels like all he's done is push that floor up and raise those standards. And that, I think, is what was desperately needed. I mean, you go back to Saturday, Pelle Madsen produced a performance we just haven't seen from him in terms of quality. Kellen Fisher looked more like the Kellen Fisher that we saw last season. And again, I mentioned just the overall structure. They just looked like they had more cohesion and more intent about them. So, yeah, I mean, it's been really hard because the training sessions have been limited because of the schedule. He came in at the end of the international break. I think he'd have had probably 3 sessions maximum with most of that squad. It would have been 1 minimum with a lot of the guys who are on international duty. Then you're thrust into a 3-game week, having played, and I know Gav knows how potent Birmingham are at St Andrews, but I think that's really difficult to judge him on that game. The 2 this week have been significant improvements with very limited training time. So I think it is exactly what you say there, Gab. It's been about the mental elements and the man management elements that he's got right. And I think probably a bit of tough love and authority as well he's walked in with. And he's a really, I mean, you notice when Philippe Clement walks into a room because he's a big guy, but he's got a presence about him. And that's something probably that the last few Norwich City head coaches just haven't had.
Yeah, and I think it'll be really interesting to see how he develops that. It's interesting for me to hear you talking about that press and obviously a little bit more in terms of the intensity that seems to have gone up there. I was looking at some stats. You'll know more than I do about whether or not these stats are right. Just what you see online. But I think I was reading that obviously Norwich tend to start games actually quite well. I think the stats I was looking at had you 6th for the sort of first half league so far this season. And obviously that then very quickly falls off a cliff when you're going through those second halves, where down to the point where I think you're the worst team in the division at the minute in the second half. Do you think that is that intensity that Clement's trying to bring? Do you think the players are fit enough for that? Is that what was affecting them through those second halves? Is that the reason the season started to pull away? And do you think there's a risk that he could be asking too much if that intensity is lifted and it does start to impact on fitness more broadly?
Yeah, I think that's a risk, isn't it? And a risk about pressing teams generally, particularly in the Championship. You can get to the new year and you can see a burnout pretty quickly. But yeah, I mean, he's been pretty open. He doesn't feel fitness-wise they are where they need to be. I know every new head coach stroke manager says that it's an easy win and an easy buy-in, but I think it's probably some truth in that. I mean, I spoke to sporting director Ben Napper a couple of weeks ago. He said the same. They've had too many injuries. They've had so many muscular injuries now as well. Jack Stacey, the latest with a hamstring issue. I think they're up to sort of double figures in terms of the muscular injuries that they've had and the bodies that they've been without. So I think part of the reason Norwich targeted him was because of his track record and the data around player availability under him and some of the conditioning and physicality work and player availability percentage that he's overseen throughout his career. So I think that was genuinely a reason. I mean, you mentioned those stats there, and it is horrendous. I mean, first half, they, as you say, they've been generally fine and competitive, and actually it's been between the 45th and 60th minute. I think they've conceded the most goals in the league. And that's been a real problem. And actually, you saw it on Saturday to an extent. It was a very, very intense, good first half. And the second half came probably more tactically. But I think that the reasons you mentioned are probably a reason for that, Ollie, because I think their fitness levels haven't been good enough to sustain those performances. So from about 60 minutes, they and this was tactical rather than enforced, which it has been in weeks gone by. they dropped back, they managed the game, they tried to play in transitions, and it just felt probably a bit more intelligent in terms of the way that they utilise that, because they're clearly not at a fitness level where he wants them to be. And for me, the big question mark is, how do you achieve that mid-season? I mean, he's got a full week on the training ground this week, and then we're into a 3-game week, and then it's the Christmas schedule. It's a tough thing to enforce, and that's going to be the challenge, I think, going through what is a very, very hectic month of Championship football.
One thing I wanted to flag, just inspired by that, Connor, with you, Ollie, is I suppose it's interesting. We spoke to a Swansea fan about Vitor Matos trying to implement that extremely aggressive style of play straight away, and the sort of pluses and minuses of that. Should we be giving Philippe Clement some credit for actually being realistic about where the fitness levels are at, and actually saying, okay, we're going to be aggressive for this period, but then actually we're going to be compact and keep a reasonable line of engagement and defensive line, and we're not going to pitch ourselves too high?
Yeah, absolutely. It's intelligent management, isn't it? You manage the squad you've got, not the squad that you wish you had. You know, we all wish we were watching Manchester City and therefore we could play however we wanted to. But that's not the way it is. And a good manager can come in and work with the tools in front of him. And it sounds as though, particularly on Saturday, getting those 3 points, so much of that comes around to the recognition of, we can do this for 45 minutes. And the second half, we need to be intelligent. We need to play sensibly. We need to have a sort of more structured style in terms of how we're still going to carry the threat on the counter. And absolutely, if Clement can get that in place, and if he's managed to get that in place as early as he had, there's a huge amount of credit that should come out of that, because I think it shows the signs of a good manager, hopefully, for Norwich.
Pelle Matson, Connor, we alluded to it earlier, the ground that he covered. Do you think he has the potential to be the glue of Norwich City for the remainder of the season in the centre of the pack?
Yeah, definitely. And I think some of it's been a little bit over the top, I think, because I think it's clear that he's come across from Denmark. They did a lot of work on him, as I think a number of other Championship clubs did. He's not a like for Marcelino Nunez, which has been part of the issue, I think, in terms of his early Norwich career. But it was by far and away the best performance. It actually reminded me a lot of a Tom Tribal performance, to be completely honest, in terms of the ground he covered, but also some of the tackles that he produced. They were big tackles in both halves at big moments that either stopped attacks or helped Norwich create them. We just haven't seen that from him so far, because I think the quality on the ball, those almost metronomic qualities, they're not in doubt. We've seen those in sort of kind of talent on an individual basis, and it's probably true of Norwich's recruitment more generally. We've seen a lot of individual stuff that makes you think, okay, I can kind of see why they like him, and maybe the issue has been fitting all of those pieces together into something cohesive and something that functions effectively. And midfield's been a big issue, because a lot of the issue has been that those players in there feel and have looked quite stodgy and quite identical and quite similar. But actually, McLean and Matson on Saturday, there was a really nice blend to them, with Marcondes in front, who could provide a little bit more energy and buzz about and whatnot. So yeah, again, I think Clement deserves credit for that as well, because it's just a level of performance we haven't seen from him. But the big challenge now is, can he do it consistently in what is a very tough period of games? Because there's clearly a talent in there, but we know what this league is like when you come from abroad. It takes time, you have to adapt to it, and it can be difficult. And sometimes a performance like that can get you going a little bit, and just add that self-belief that actually he can play at this level and is capable of dealing with the robustness and physicality of it can be key sometimes.
I think you make a great point there, Connor, in terms of recruitment and focusing too much on the individual. And it makes me wonder, is that something you need to look at in terms of the next 2 transfer windows? Because if I look at great Norwich City teams, the one under Paul Lambert, for instance, first thing people always say is brilliant characters. You could be 3-0 down in the game and people believe that you'd get back into it. And you had Grant Holt there, you had Stephen Whittaker, Russell Martin, big vocal characters that made the Alex Tete going a bit further forward, I think. Or actually, no, was he part of the double promotion? He was certainly in the Premier League under Lambert, wasn't he?
Yeah, he came in the Premier League season. Yeah.
Premier League. So it's players like that that can be part of the collective, if you like. I think that's a really important thing from my point of view that Norwich have got to try and recruit for in the next 2 windows.
Yeah, and I think it's hard, isn't it? Because you bring in so many players from abroad, particularly some that are young, and I think the hit rate, certainly initially, is always going to be lower. And probably what's cost them a little bit this season is they've got far too many in that squad who are either in year 1 or year 2 of Championship football, and not enough of those kind of dependable types that you can almost bed them in around that are going to help keep that consistent level of performance. That's something that they've really struggled in, because you're asking not just 1, 2, 3 players to adapt to, not just adapt, probably thrive at the level. You're actually asking 7, 8, 9 and the bulk of your team to do that, and they're all in different places and they all go up and down, and there's peaks and troughs, and we know kind of development in football isn't linear, so it's been difficult, I think, to maintain any kind of level of performance. But I think you can, as I said, I think you can see in individuals that talent is there. Probably what has been lacking for me, and again, whether we will see this in the windows to come, is that they've identified good players on an individual basis. But it's probably that element, like you say, that squad building element of this is a really good player, but how is it a really good player in our team, in the team that we're trying to create? And that's probably the bit that's been lacking. And that's what makes January so interesting for me, because I'm sure Philippe Clement, with the history that he's got, the contact book that he's got, the experience that he's got across a multitude of leagues, is going to have some good ideas of players that he wants to bring in, and they need to get that blend right and make sure it's in a better place than it has been so far this season, where it's probably they've probably lent too far and too aggressively into that strategy of buying probably players for quite a lot of money from overseas that in the here and now probably just aren't quite what they needed to be a consistent Championship team. So yeah, I think like you say, that squad building element is going to be really big, and also not in the players they sign, but also those that they decide to move on as well. And that's almost to me as fascinating as maybe what they do from an inward perspective, I would say.
Absolutely. Do you think Norwich City are going to stay up? Have you got more belief based on the last couple of performances that you're on the right track?
Yeah, based on the last week, I think if we'd have had this conversation a week ago, I think it probably would have been very, very different. And it's always slightly skewed, isn't it, after you win a game? But I think it's hard not to at least feel a bit more optimistic. Let's be honest, the challenge they've got still is immense because of the position that they're in, and a win at the weekend, and yet they're still 4 points from safety. So it's not insurmountable. They've got to now work on consistency, and Philippe Clement has said this: they're going to lose games, they're going to perform badly in the weeks ahead, but it's about having those fundamentals, I think, and that's where the intensity and those kind of that structure for me is so important, because if they can lean on that in the games ahead, then they hopefully can just keep themselves ticking over and getting points. So yeah, look, I would hope with the length of time that they've got, with the transfer window as well, which isn't always a silver bullet to these things, plus now Philippe Clement in the building with what seems to be a way of working that at least has got an initial reaction. Let's hope in a month's time we're talking about it in the same light. But yeah, it definitely feels like now there's a clearer route to safety than there was if we'd have spoken a week ago. And that positivity and optimism has been in very short supply in Norwich City circles. So it's nice to be stood here or talking to you guys with a smile on my face about Norwich City, because it's been a very, very, very long time since that happened, and it may not happen again for 3-4 weeks. So we'll revel in it while it does happen.
Absolutely. Conor, thanks so much for talking to us, and keep up the great work on Pinken.
Top man, thank you guys, appreciate it.
Cheers. And everyone go subscribe to pinken.com. Ollie, I don't know if you've got another couple of minutes just to sort of round up, because I know you like your dinner around this time, don't you?
Tea time. We always do this at tea time, Gab. It's always the same, but I'm still here. We can crack on.
Lovely. I just wanted to kind of, given the optimism that you've spoken with, I think I'm quite confident I would describe it as and I would put Sheffield United and Norwich City in this bracket. That does pile the pressure on Portsmouth, Swansea and Oxford, doesn't it?
It really does, yeah, and I think they will be feeling it. I think Swansea in particular will be feeling that really strongly right now. I think I got that sense of, there were, with Oxford, it's almost Oxford expected this. They're in the position they thought they'd be, outside the relegation zone, but having to keep an eye over the shoulder. They're prepared. They've built a squad for this battle. Swansea, for me, are a team that I really do struggle with in this kind of environment, because sometimes I bite my tongue. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I get very carried away. But the Swansea way is something that drives me mad, because it's not been successful for 10 years and it doesn't look like being. Football has moved on. We have changed. We have transitioned. We spoke about it earlier. And I can't think of a style or a way of playing that will be less suited to a Championship dogfight. And that's what really worries me about that. Are they willing to adapt and be pragmatic in order to get the results to stay up? Or are they so wedded to the Swansea way that ultimately that will be their downfall. And I think it'll be interesting to see how that develops. A team we haven't spoken about today and who we have always spoken about with massive positivity, who we really do have a lot of belief, a lot of sort of love for what they've done so far this season, but a team who, based off the back of a bad week, might be looking over the shoulder is Charlton Athletic as well.
Yes.
Unbelievable start to the season. Really like them. I think there's so much to like there, but there is a reason they were the favourites at the start of the year in terms of relegation. It's because the squad, as you look at it, isn't the strongest in this division. There are question marks here, there, and everywhere. And while Nathan Jones is somebody you can rely on, fantastic manager, they, for me, are the other team that might just be feeling panic bells right now if they can't start to turn around their form.
So I would probably make the statement, Ollie, that other than the teams we've mentioned tonight for those two of the three relegation spots, I think Charlton and Blackburn are the only other ones that I could see dropping, because if you go above that, Leicester and Watford, I think, have got too much quality. And then beyond that, you're getting into Southampton and then teams that are on 25 points plus, which I think if you got 25 points after 18 games or 17 games, I think half the points you need, I don't think you're going to go down. So therefore, I would narrow it down, even at this stage, we're only just turning into December, I would narrow it down to 2 from 7. And so, I think Charlton are one of those 7 that, you've probably got to talk about after 4 consecutive defeats.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. I think that's a really sensible way of looking at it. I think it's 2 from, unless something unprecedented happens. Obviously, we saw a few years ago where Hull were in a similar position, sold the 2 best players, and that happened. I can't predict that happening for anybody. I don't see how there's a team. I don't think there's anybody who's as reliant on 1 or 2 players where that implosion could happen. So I agree. I think it's down to that 7. If you were pushing me on it, and I know you're not, but you probably would have done if I'd given you the opportunity, I think I will say that Sheffield Wednesday are relegated. I think we can park that one. I think everybody will agree there. Sure. I then think the other 2 will be Swansea and, gun to my head, Portsmouth.
Yeah, I think on the principle of always keeping faith in Gary Rowett, I'm inclined to agree, but I see so much room for things to change, because I think Swansea, you could argue, have a mid-table squad. Portsmouth have some Portsmouth have the best left winger in the league and some really good attacking options, and it might, a few January additions and they could end up having a pretty good squad for their position. And then Oxford have Gary Rowett, who's such a safe pair of hands that 11 years of championship history you kind of want to rely on.
So we think it's going to be Blackburn and Charlton.
I know. I mean, I think Charlton can get sucked in. I'm starting to worry. I'm starting to flag them a little bit as a potential plummeter. That's how I would look at it. All right. Well, I think that just about covers it. Ollie, I'll let you go from the dungeon now.
Thanks. My pizza's almost ready. I'm gonna run.
Exactly. Thanks a lot, Ollie. Thanks for everyone for watching, and we'll see you again for another Championship podcast next week.